welcome everybody. We certainly do appreciate you taking the time to be adding to the community involvement. I think this is our 9th community meeting that we've had on the 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue areas, and we've gotten a lot of excellent information. So my name is Ron Gobble. I am the mayor asked me and our firm to be the project managers coordinating the work down there. So we're really excited to be part of this. As many of you recall, Kimley-Horn, along with Hawkins Partners and several other consultants, Wilmot has been working, pulling together concepts and taking the ideas that you've been suggesting in the previous community meetings and trying to put those into the form of the 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue in that district. All that following the guidelines of the Urban Land Institute and their suggestions about how we go. So we're going to go through a few slides tonight, kind of cover what some of our thoughts are. One of the things about it that we've learned is that this is really the heart of the city. So if you change things on 2nd Avenue, it is truly amazing to me how much impact it has on other parts of the city. And, whether it's traffic, whether it's fire protection, whether it's sustainability or any of the other elements that all tie together. But this is the heart. It's mainly streetscape concepts. So they'll continue to evolve. Our goal right now is to get some schematics and concepts kind of firmed up in the next few months. So with that, the next slide, Michelle. We all remember Christmas Day. As tragic as it was, we're moving forward. We're moving in a positive direction, and we're looking forward to really making this not just one street, but that district, something that's an entity that supports itself. Next slide. We've done a lot of work. The property owners, and you'll hear more about this in a minute, are really beginning to get to the terms of what can they do and when can they do it. So there's going to be a lot of things that are coming together. It's been a little bit over 9 months, and it's a slow process, a lot of damage. And so we're continuing to move on. It not only affected 2nd Avenue, but affected 1st Avenue. And again, all of this is coming into play as we start trying to organize how do we make the street better and really make it for Nashvillians. I think the ULI report did an excellent job of articulating that we need a district for Nashvillians. So next slide. This is the map showing the damaged buildings. Actually, one red building is now turned yellow. So we're making progress. The green buildings are the ones that are essentially back open. Some still have damage. The one I live in still has damage. So every building and every building owner is different. And we're making progress out of 65 that have been that were affected. Over half are open, and the construction work is going to be going on literally for the next couple of years. Next slide. So I think my job is to hand this to Michelle at this point and let Michelle kind of get everybody up to speed.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. One of the things that I just want to add to what Ron said, the intention for tonight's meeting, we are going to review everything we've heard so far, who we've heard it from, and really show some concepts from the designs for what we're looking at as far as 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue in the area. So we definitely want your feedback. So we'll have a survey at the end. We absolutely want your input. It's really imperative that we hope that everyone is one of the voices that's really going to help shape this area. So we definitely want to share that. I'm going to go through here real quick, just kind of where we've been so far. So of course, this blast happened on Christmas Day last year. Since then, Metro stepped up pretty quickly and started to conduct some listening sessions. A couple of them where we were really talking to stakeholders, those directly affected, the business owners, merchants, residents, occupants of those spaces. Those are the folks we're going to call, you're going to hear us refer to them as the stakeholders. We've spent a lot of time and will continue to spend a lot of time talking to them as we refine what worked and what they would like to see in future designs for the streetscapes. We've also talked to the public a number of times, including work sessions. One of them was actually held in the snow. It was virtual, and it was probably one of the most successful virtual community meetings I've ever been to. So huge kudos to the Civic Design Center for that. It was pretty cool. Also, the mayor pretty quickly provided a grant of $500,000 to help, in the beginning stages of the recovery efforts. So that is something that the mayor and mayor's office administration has done. We've had a tremendous support from all departments, all stakeholders, council members. Everybody's really been great to work together. I mean, the desire here is strong for Second Avenue. So we've held several other meetings. We've done site walks, in-person meetings, more virtual, hybrid, public versus stakeholders, design charrettes. This is actually our 9th meeting since February. So we've heard from a lot of folks. This is what some of these meetings have looked like, just FYI. If you have been a part of it, we're really thankful for that. A lot of it has been virtual. We've had a media tour so we could help provide a better idea, shed light on what's going on in the conditions of the site. We've spent time walking up and down the site with the design team and the stakeholders to really hone in on those specifics. A lot of in-person workshops, hanging over drawings, looking at some of the concepts and trying to find out what works and what could be better. So these ideas have really gone towards, we're starting to put that on paper. I mean, it started with Post-it notes and locating areas for improvements along Second Avenue and First Avenue. You can kind of see how the evolution of this is going. We're hearing some messages really loud and clear. I can say that for sure. We're hearing green space. These are actually quotes directly from the public on some of our, sorry, distracted by the pop-ups, some of our Minty surveys. So we're hearing people would really love to have a connection to the river, activate the building facades on First Avenue, more shops, space for locals. I mean, we're really hearing a lot of a strong message that this is something that people do not want this to be like Broadway. Broadway is great in its own sense, but there's not a desire to expand that up on Second Avenue. People want Second Avenue to be a neighborhood and have that feel and have a space for the local folks. So the more connection, the better. The buildings are really deep. Try to find something that adds interest along the way. Activate. Lots of ideas and lots of desire to connect to Riverfront in the river with an arcade. So we'll talk more about some of that, but these are some of the things that we've been hearing along the way. Eric, do you want to dive into some of the data?
Yeah, gladly. Thanks, Michelle. I'm Eric Hoke. I'm the design director at the Civic Design Center, and we've been helping with a lot of this community engagement effort over the past few months here. So as was mentioned, this will be our 9th event. We've had over 500 people participate, and that not even including everyone here today. And then 40 or so, probably more than that even now, business owners and stakeholders and directly affected residents. So sort of some of the people who have been involved with the results. And so we also tried to pull out, we had tons of comments over the past few months, and we tried to group them into categories. So we kind of isolated some key themes, and you might recognize these categories from our book, Shaping Healthy Communities. But if you're not familiar, they are walkability and pedestrian safety, neighborhood design and development, transportation, housing, food resource, access to food resources, and open space and parks. So over what kind of majority of the comments we summarized were 40% was related to walkability and pedestrian safety. So a lot of the kind of topics that were discussed were around that kind of consistent activity along these corridors, being first and second, and continued pedestrian connections, not just to first and second, all around to the riverfront and to the alley network and other places around downtown. And then lighting was another kind of safety element that we heard a ton about. And then neighborhood design and development, that kind of looks, a lot of discussion was about kind of the all-day use of Second Avenue and First Avenue and like the historic charm that we were getting at. So those were some of the hot topics there. And then just the access to the river in regards to the open space, that was probably the kind of the top discussion points that we heard from those categories. And so we showed a lot of examples of other cities, and so actually 53% favored this completely pedestrianized example from Denver, if you're familiar with the 18th Street Mall, and then the remaining 47% favored these other examples from other cities. And so interestingly, how that kind of relates to the, if you can go to the next slide, Michelle. So looking at kind of how that related to when we showed actual designs as it related to Second Avenue, people tended to favor the coplanar or shared street example. But it was on average the most popular. So just kind of interesting how like we take inspiration from other cities, but when it comes to our street in particular with Second, that coplanar street was the most popular. And then on when we showed examples from other cities on First Avenue, the most popular one example we showed was from Savannah, and I think that what we can take from that is just the activity and the storefront facades that were so vibrant and active on First Avenue, or what people could kind of see that and how it relates to First. And then, so this is a similar slide, but shows that the data that it relates to that. And so likewise with Second Avenue, that coplanar street was again the favored on average design that we showed as it relates to First Avenue. So overall, we averaged the scores of kind of general pedestrian feeling, and on average, it was 3.5 out of 5 favored in total the more pedestrian enhancements. And so that, I think that's kind of the main takeaway from all the data is this district it was favorable to promote pedestrian enhancements. So with that, I'll pass it over to Nora with planning.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm Nora Yu with Metro Planning. I've been really happy to work closely with GHP, Civic Design Center, and all the partners on this really important project. So I'll quickly summarize here a little bit of information that came out of the ULI, or Urban Land Institute, study that was done earlier, which Ron mentioned in his introduction. So in March, we actually brought ULI in. They have a special program called the Advisory Services Panel Program. And that's been a long running program where essentially they come to communities and cities that are facing some sort of important or critical land use question. And they do an intensive panel study to help make recommendations on how to move forward. So after the explosion, this was an opportunity to actually draw upon their expertise. And we got a panel of 7 experts from around the country to convene. And these are some of the themes that they kind of bring to the table, or lenses that they're looking at this situation through, and that they then make recommendations off it. What was really inspiring to us was we've worked obviously closely with Civic Design Center on hosting, and also GHP, a lot of these listening and visioning sessions, even before ULI came. And what we were happy to see is, if we go to the next slide, ULI came back with findings after their intensive week-long panel. And it was really echoing a lot of what we have heard from you all, from the public. There was a lot of consistency in areas that we need to focus in on. where we should prioritize efforts. So we really felt like it was a great validation of a lot of the feedback that we've received that Eric was just kind of covering through some of the surveys and other outreach that we've done. So yeah, generally speaking, here's some of the things that they were looking at, how do we make a successful rebuild of Second Avenue? What would that look like? How do you really tie back that this is the soul of the city? This is where the city began. So it has a historic importance and obviously adjacency of the riverfront, a very important part of downtown. We want to make sure we rebuild it in a really great way. So if we go to the next slide, these next two slides were done with our team over at Hawkins Partners, which was great. They helped compile some of the information and feedback that we have heard and kind of overlaid it on these two maps. This one is showing feedback that we had heard on First Avenue and the riverfront. And then the next slide shows feedback more based on Second Avenue. But you'll see there's, I think, again, some of the same themes mentioned by Michelle and Eric. How do we get more green space? How do we make this a space for locals, something, a counterpoint to Broadway? Both the park, the riverfront area, and First Avenue and Second Avenue. And I would say that was one big takeaway from ULI was when we talk about rebuilding Second Avenue, it's actually looking at this entire area. It means looking at First Avenue and it means looking at the riverfront. So that's why we've been working with our design teams on these key themes of when we rebuild the area, we're really talking about a whole, district. It's not just this block or these two blocks of Second Avenue. It's that plus the greater area. These are the key themes that came through, both through ULI, both through the feedback we've heard from the public. We kind of categorized them broadly into these 6 areas, but riverfront design, program and activation, and streetscape are the first 2. And we'll hear a little more on those today from our design teams. Historic integrity, creating connections, property opportunities, and also very important programming and operations of all of these redesigned spaces. So making them beautiful, well-designed, thoughtful spaces, but also activating them. And we understand the importance of that. Next slide. So this just shows with our key themes, kind of starting to map those out over next steps. We've had GHP really leading the effort on immediate reopening efforts, utility work, really coordinating, getting the streets back open. But in the mid to long term, this is kind of what we're all here for today. We really want to talk about some of the big picture items, and broadly, we put those into 3 categories of capital improvements, strategizing and rebuilding properties, and then again, that programming and operations piece. So with the strategizing and building property category, I want to hand it over to Dave Johnston, who is an architect with STG Design. He is working closely with the owners of properties 170 to 176 Second Avenue. Those were the properties directly across from the blast. So I would love for Dave to take over from here, and he's going to give a brief overview of some of the work that they're looking at as they look to rebuild those damaged properties.
Great, thanks, Nora. Thank you very much. Yes, we're pleased to work with the ownership of those 4 buildings. And I want to talk a little bit today, about 5 or 10 minutes on what this looks like. And Michelle, I think you have the screen. There we go. So those 4 properties were obviously damaged by the bomb in a significant way. And we can start right there. We know what it looked like on Christmas. And then we also know what it looked like across the street and the difference between a hardened facility and buildings that were built 140 years ago. Significant impact. The next slide shows what it looked like in March when all of the debris was being removed from those buildings. And keep in mind that under that debris is the rubble that was remaining of the facades because they were completely obliterated. And we move forward towards June and we see the buildings cleaned out. Ron showed those earlier, and what was remaining after the bomb impact on the structure itself. The first thing that we need to do is to walk through with the Historic Zoning Commission, what are the next steps? So we met with them a couple of weeks ago to talk through how we stabilize the property. So 3 main components that the first one, the easy piece, is to repair that there were some gutters on the backside. I shouldn't say backside, and that's a very important point, on First Avenue that was being damaged just by water infiltration. So we've repaired those gutters. On the second note, once we peeled back those walls, we put mortar across the tops of the exposed walls to help stop the further deterioration of the masonry from rain and just weather. And third, the really big component, when you look at this screen, there are a series of dashed lines that represent a grid of stabilization. Now, there are two ways to do that. We can stabilize the building temporarily on the exterior, or we can stabilize it from the interior. If you'll go to the next slide, one of the things that we're doing, this shows what those walls look like now, where we've repaired the tops of those masonry walls with a protective coating. The gutters have been sealed up with the downspouts that are on the other ends just to stop that. The next slide gives you a bit of a detail on how you start to repair these buildings from the inside. What we're doing is not only repairing it from the inside, we're going to allow the structure that we're adding to remain as the permanent structure. So basically, we have to design the new building to fit inside the old building in order to stabilize it. The next slide gives you an idea of some of the, keep going to the next one, some of the reused materials. We've saved at least 30,000 brick, as you see those palletized in the upper left. The majority of the face brick looks like that detailed picture where they were blown into pieces, which are obviously not able to be reused. The next slide shows you some photographs of the interior, the old fireplace, that scale, which apparently is fairly unique. There's not a lot of those around, and we want to be able to reuse those on the interiors of the building as we go forward. Other items such as the stone walls and the brick walls, we're doing everything we can to keep those and repair those, because those are a great value as we start looking at character of what goes in place of the buildings that are there now. Now, most of today is about First Avenue and Second Avenue, and how do we make the connection between the two? And as we visualize what revitalizing this property is about, the collaboration efforts between Michelle's group, with Ron, with Historic, with Tim Walker, with Cyril Stewart, with Historic Zoning, along with Nora and her group at Planning, and Lucy. We had several meetings where we collaborated on what can we do with this property to pull all of these pieces together. Taking the ULI report that was done, one of the most important pieces is that yellow slot that you see across the page right now. That is the building that was the shortest, but it was blown all the way through. So it made, fortunately for us, it allowed us to look at how do we make a connector. It's fairly obvious that we could use that property to connect First Avenue and Second Avenue. All the shots we see on television, especially on Monday night, for instance, you see front street, you see the First Avenue of Nashville. That becomes our new front porch. It's always been there. It's not going to change. How do we restore that and connect the people, not only to the river, but to First Avenue and to Second Avenue? So part of the process that we're going through is getting approval that we've received approval from the Historic Zoning Commission to move to the next step. Part of that next step is to use what we call an SP, a specific plan. By doing that, that allows the owners of the property to disclose what their plans and intentions are for the property to the public. What the owners have decided to do is to actually limit the use of that property where it is, there is no surface parking allowed. So we will go back with, as you see, what that Second Avenue facade looked like on December 24th, and try to do as much as we can to recreate that without matching it in a Disneyland approach. The next slide shows you our concept of what this would look like. Now, keep in mind, those are gone. Those facades are gone. The owners would like to go back with a 4-story brick facade that matches its neighbors. It's in keeping in material and scale and proportions with the rest of the buildings. with the addition, if you want to call it that, of an opening that connects First Avenue to Second Avenue. That opening is live. It's an address. It's retail. It's restaurant. It could be a pop-up retail shop, but it is an active 30-foot wide strip that does go from First to Second. Now that's a 17-foot drop in elevation, so there'll be steps. It'll be terraced as you go through that space. Ultimately, what the developer or the owners of the property would like to do is to develop it into a hotel. That's what they've done in the past. They do in a lot of the properties that were mentioned before by Eric in Savannah, and reusing the materials, the facades across the front, the old cast iron storefronts, to refurbish those and recreate those as much as possible. The next is when we look at it from First Avenue side, and there's a close-up of what that connector looks like. These buildings as they exist today, well, say on December 24th, we want to keep that almost exactly the way it is. The building on the left is 170. We will restore it, put in new windows, touch up some of the masonry work, and keep it just as it is. The two on the right have a severe structural element that is critically damaged, about an 8-inch bow in the building. So we're going to actually take it down piece by piece and then put it right back up with some newer techniques that keep it much stronger. It'll last another 140 years. So in essence, you can see it looks exactly the way it did, with the added advantage of another 140 years of service, and opening the street facades up to sidewalk cafes, the connection through back up to Second, and a hotel use. Next slide shows some of the notes about what that could look like, and really as much of the preservation of the materials that we can do. Next slide is a zoom in, I believe, of that, where you do have storefront, you have cafe dining in that space. The next slide shows some historical precedent for what those spaces could look like, with steps, with cafes, with storefronts, but it's an active public space. It really becomes a destination, not just simply a connection. When we think about what those spaces would look like on the interior of these buildings, the next few slides go through what those materials would be. It's a boutique hotel. It's that with restaurants and retail that really fits in with the neighborhood. And you can see how that starts to reflect some of the hotels and some of the work on 4th and 5th Avenue. It's a different feel than what you see on Broadway, but it still has that natural Nashville feel. And we'll call that authentic Nashville. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle to talk through the 1st and 2nd Avenue pieces.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's exciting to see that come together. And just real quick, a reminder, some of those key themes that we've heard from the community, from stakeholders, and from ULI are creating connections from 2nd Avenue to 1st Avenue in the Riverfront, activating Riverfront, activating 1st Avenue so that it, there's desire to go and play on that side of the street, and then also maintaining that historic character. And so really, I think that, going through the process that Dave and his group and the building owners have been going through have really been able to keep all of those key themes in mind. And so, this is a really positive thing, I think. Of course, Nashville's really good at turning a difficult situation into something amazing. So this is no exception to that. It's nice to see. Do want to spend a moment and introduce the design team. So we've talked a little bit about these designs. We're going to get right into 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue, and then moving into the park area. We want to introduce Kimley-Horn. They've been an instrumental part of the conceptual stages here, and it's been really great. We've had folks from both the Atlanta office as well as the local office. We also have Hawkins Partners, which most of you probably know and love. Kim Hawkins and her team, Nathan Oliver, have been wonderful and will continue to participate in a lot of the visioning for this. And then, of course, Tiffany Wilmot Inc. has been included and providing the sustainability design, as well as, our lots of conversation about trash and waste management. And that's something that, in order to activate First Avenue, that's a huge component that needs to be solved and reworked. So that's a really important conversation that will continue to ongo. So I'd like to kick it over now to Eric Bossman with Kimley-Horn.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thanks everybody for joining us this evening. This really is exciting now to be able to take all this fascinating and wonderful input that you've gathered over the last 10 months and now start to put some visuals to it for what can Second Avenue, First Avenue, the Riverfront become over the next coming years. So you've heard a lot of the background this evening about the input that's been gathered. And that really was our starting point as we looked at how do we recover and rebuild Second Avenue? How do we take all of the design input and those concepts and put it into words and in designs that start to bring Second Avenue back to life? And so as Eric talked about earlier, there was a lot of conversation in the previous meetings about creating more pedestrian space. How much of this street, Second Avenue specifically, historically had 4 lanes of 2 lanes of parking, 2 lanes of traffic that were given to automobiles, and about 28 feet of the street that were given to pedestrians and sidewalk activities. How do we rethink that in a way where we really maximize Second Avenue for pedestrians? And you heard Michelle say it, you've heard Dave reference it as part of the architecture piece. How do we make sure that we maintain the celebration of the history of Second Avenue? And at this point in time, that's both Second Avenue's founding as part of the birthplace of Nashville, but also the recent history that we've experienced as well. How do we continue to maintain that traditional architecture, that sense of place, but also recognize Second Avenue's role within downtown and the greater Nashville area? I think we also heard pretty clearly through the input sessions that one of the things that made and makes Second Avenue unique is the tree canopy. It's something that really was a prominent feature, is a prominent feature of Second Avenue and sets it apart from many of the downtown streets. So what you'll see this evening is that all of our design thoughts maintain that tree canopy and or consider where it may need to be enhanced or replaced within portions of the corridor. And we know that no matter what we do in the future, our needs are going to change. So if we're going to make a 30-year or 40-year, 50-year investment in Second Avenue, we have to design for flexibility. We have to think not only about the way that our corridors work today, but the way that this street may work in the future and the flexibility to adapt and to change for generations to come. And while there was a tremendous amount of conversation about, can we do 100% pedestrian street 24/7, 365? In meeting with a lot of the local business owners and operators, we have to acknowledge and recognize that there's a need to maintain some level of circulation, as well as loading, valet, and drop-offs on the street. Now, while we do recognize and acknowledge the need for all of that, we also think there are ways we can tweak it. And you might notice that on-street parking is not included in that list. So that's something we'll talk about a little bit this evening as well. So what I want to do is walk you basically through some design options and alternatives that are currently under consideration. And then later in the evening, when we get to the Menti, we're going to get your input on some of the elements of those different variations within the alternatives. Now, if we start at the South Block, so Broadway is on your right, Commerce Street on your left on the graphic. If we went down and said, how far can we go with pedestrianizing the street? Well, we may be able to make it a pedestrian street and close it down for some periods by putting in some methods that we can close it down on a temporary basis. But if we're going to maintain the opportunity for flexibility, for adaptability, and frankly, for public safety, there's probably a minimum level where we need to incorporate at least the opportunity for 2 travel lanes. Now, we think in looking at some of the traffic numbers that the street really doesn't need 2 travel lanes all of the time. And in particular, if you're going to close down the street, obviously sometimes those won't be travel lanes. In the most extreme sense, we think you could probably do it in a way where you've got one lane that's dedicated to travel and maybe one lane that's a flex lane. And that becomes your loading zone or your valet or your Uber Lyft drop off. Regardless of how far we go, we definitely want to tame the street and give back more space to pedestrians. So even if we maintained 24 feet for 2 travel lanes, whether they're used as travel lanes or not, that gives us the ability to widen our sidewalks from about 14 feet today to between 20 to 25 feet on a permanent basis all the way up and down the street. And in this design, you're seeing all of the existing street trees maintained in the south block because we're able to do so. Now, in all frankness, when we met with the local property owners, the local businesses, there's some concern about that. So we ticked it up to the next level. What if we include some loading zones just on the east side of the street? Again, not parking areas, loading zones. So that's where the loading could happen during the day, where the valet, the Uber Lyft drop off could happen during the evening. We could get them off to the side a little bit where they're not clogging up the 3 lanes. But again, keeping that street as narrow as possible and widening the sidewalk as much as possible. So we don't want loading lanes or drop off lanes that go all the way up and down the block, but carefully selected and strategically located to meet the need. And when we look at it this way, it definitely is weighted towards the east side of the street. So there's one more shot at it in alternative 3 that looks at alternating loading zones to the left and the right, the east and west side of the street. Again, we're trying to minimize those. We're trying to carve as much space as possible for the sidewalks, for pedestrians, for street side dining. But in order to meet the public safety demands and concerns and some of the logistical concerns, we are allowing for up to 2 lanes, even though we may create additionally those mechanisms to close the lanes off when you want to make the street fully pedestrianized. So the next image shows basically what 2nd Avenue looked like the previous year. And then with these considerations and design concepts that we're talking about, what it could look like in the future. Again, we're trying to narrow these lanes as much as possible. Eric talked about the potential for a co-planar street. That is an option here. We do have some stormwater issues that we need to work through. So even if it's not co-planar, what you're seeing in this concept drawing is actually an angled, not quite a rolled curb, but sort of an angled curb that sort of provides that same sense that the sidewalk is more closely aligned to the street level so that when it is closed down, there's the opportunity to create that pedestrian space. But again, maintaining flexibility as we go through the options. So that's how we've started to translate some of this information into the south block. When we get to the middle block, we actually think there's a pretty exciting opportunity that because the west side of the street, the left side or the bottom of the plan graphic that you're looking at has a lot of the AT&T buildings that does not have street level activity. We actually think there's an opportunity to move the street a little bit to the west, particularly when we're narrowing it down. We can move it to the west and actually further maximize the sidewalk space, the sidewalk dining, the activity on the east part of the street. And with the architecture that you saw previously and the ability to create this cut through between 2nd and 1st Avenue, we think there's also an opportunity to create a public plaza or a public space in the middle of the block. We heard many business owners talk about that even prior to the events of last year, a lot of the activity starts at Broadway and might make it up to Commerce. But then when you go from Commerce to Church Street, the activity really drops off pretty quickly. We believe that creating this urban plaza not only will create this moment that calls more attention to the crossover between 2nd and 1st, to some of the recent history that's occurred in the area, but also create a focal point that will draw more individuals, more patrons up the street, further into 2nd Avenue, and bringing more attention to the businesses and the opportunities that are there. Now, at the end of the day, the curve may not be as severe as what we're showing here. What we're talking about is really moving the street to the west. There's a variety of different geometries we can use to do that. We just have to meet up at Commerce and Church to make sure that our alignments work. And if you don't like that particular look at the plaza is definitely something that is open for discussion and further design consideration. So taking part of an arched approach, part of a more geometric square approach that maybe has some light towers or light elements within it. We've got 2 more on the next slide that even goes into, different ways to begin to look at and conceptualize and design. So the plaza is far from finished. Part of the input we want from you tonight is whether the plaza is a good idea in creating that public space within 2nd Avenue, this point of remembrance, but not remembrance of a negative thing that happened, a celebration of the spirit, the enduring spirit of Nashville and of the people of Nashville that are embodied in what is being recreated and rebuilt along 2nd Avenue. So in addition to that thought for the plaza, as we go to the north block, then we start to sort of return again to some of the ideas that we talked about on the south block, narrowing the street as much as possible, widening the sidewalk environment. We also think, the porous nature of 2nd Avenue and being able to reconnect it to First into the riverfront is so important. And Bankers Alley and Bank Street provide yet another opportunity to do that, where we can potentially provide a raised intersection that not only slows the traffic, calms what few cars will be there, but really creates this pedestrian moment and this pedestrian space across the intersection. We could also do that treatment at Commerce and at Church Street as well, frankly, where we raise the intersection and again, are changing the balance between vehicles or any sort of motorized aspect and the pedestrians whom we're really trying to create the space for. And on the north block, there are 6 trees that remain. In order to really reestablish that canopy, we could actually replant the north block entirely. And by doing that, move the trees a little out towards the center line. The sidewalks are actually much, much more narrow in this north block than they are in the other 2 blocks. So the second alternative for the north block replants all of the trees and moves them in towards the center line. Again, trying to create that sense of canopy and maximizing the space for the pedestrians. So one more view just that gives you an idea of what that raised intersection. This is an example from Portland, but you can see how it starts to change the environment and the balance between pedestrians and other users within the corridor. So that's a little bit of the progress that we've made in translating some of the design input to 2nd Avenue. Again, I want to highlight as I hand it over to Nathan to highlight what's going on 1st Avenue. The idea here is really not just a single corridor. This is about really transforming this entire section of downtown, linking the riverfront to First to 2nd and through Bank Street and the proposal of 172 2nd Avenue and Butler's Run, the opportunity to really create a greater sense of collaboration between 2nd Avenue and the environment on 1st Avenue and create a destination in downtown Nashville that builds off of its historic presence, but is very, very different from the Broadway environment and caters to a very different population within the city. Nathan, you want to take it from there and talk a little more about First?
Yes, thank you, Eric. It's great to be with you all here tonight. My name is Nathan Oliver. I'm with Hawkins Partners, and we've been working with the rest of the design team and the project team and really looking closely at First Avenue as a part of this work. And we've taken a lot of the feedback that you all provided throughout this time, throughout all these different public meetings and engagement opportunities that we've had. And a lot of those were mentioned in some of the work that Eric was describing. And taking some of those and really looking at First Avenue and applying those in a way that can make it a more transformative space. Some of those that really came out as themes that were mentioned: dining facing the river, a pedestrianized street, an environment that's much more about walkability, pedestrian safety, and connectivity in a way that really activates First Avenue. As Dave kind of mentioned, these buildings are really unique because they really have 2 fronts. Front Street or First Avenue is really an opportunity to front Riverfront Park and to front the river. And so as we begin to look at the opportunities, there's an opportunity to really think about activating these and allowing them to be more of a front. And so what these concepts, or what this concept shows, what we heard was, let's look at how we can pull the street away from the building to create a pedestrian experience along the building, where we can provide opportunities for that activation to take place. And what you see in the yellow boxes along the facade is what we're calling a flex zone, because that's a zone where there's a number of different active things that can happen. That can be dining, that can be retail that spills out onto the street. There may be a need where there's a valet lane for the particular business, or some type of service that needs to be accommodated within that space. And so that flex zone represented in the sections that you see across the bottom provides the opportunity for that activation to occur along the buildings. And then from that flex zone, we expand the pedestrian sidewalk space that you see kind of along there between that street to allow a stronger pedestrian connectivity in a pedestrian environment. And then that spills out onto a shared street space. And this is an opportunity, much like Second Avenue, that we can really look at prioritizing the pedestrian. So there's a strong connection across First Avenue to Riverfront Park. And that really allows that connection to really be stronger from Second Avenue through these places that you see highlighted here, Butler's Run and the 172, and really creating a block that's much more connected as a whole. And so the way that we address this street is thinking about these ways to expand that pedestrian connectivity and create an environment that's much more active to the uses that are going to be there. The other thing that you'll notice on the other side of the travel lanes, we have maintained the 2-foot travel lanes. You'll see they've narrowed down a little bit, but maintain that connectivity through there. On the other side, you'll see a wider shared promenade as well to really enhance the connectivity and to think about the future options in ways that it can connect to Riverfront Park. The 172 Second Avenue connection really presents a great opportunity to create a little bit of a node and a plaza there. And as it lands at the north side of Fort Nashboro and at the north end of Riverfront Park, again, is one of those ways to activate the space and activate the streetscape. Go to the next slide, if you will. And so as we begin to think about what can happen within these spaces, you'll see that flex zone that we were just talking about, described in a little bit more detail. Begin to think about some of the uses that can start to occur along this facade and things that will begin to provide that activation in a way that the building can really start to engage the street and the pedestrian engage the building as well. And then Michelle, you can go to the next one. And then again, this is really looking again back at the work that Dave talked about and that connection of 172 that we were just speaking of. And again, thinking about some of the opportunities to create an atmosphere and a character along here that's really representative of a lot of the things that we heard and a lot of the things that people are looking for and how they want to First Avenue to really embrace this idea, this block and this active node here right in the heart of Nashville. All right, and then one more. Coming up here. And then this is just a character rendering to kind of start to describe a little bit of what we were just seeing in plan. And sometimes it's hard to really visualize when looking at it from the top and in a plan view, what that kind of experience and character may be. And so this is kind of starting to put a little bit of illustration to what that environment could be. You'll see that kind of active zone along the building, flex zone that bleeds into a pedestrian space. And then this really starts to convey this idea. This is really about a pedestrian experience. So we're prioritizing the pedestrian and really encouraging the active nature along it, north and south and east and west across the connection. And that can come in a number of different ways that we think about the treatment of First Avenue, the pavement type, as Eric was talking about, opportunities of a rolled curb, opportunities that were spoken to earlier of a coplanar street. So those types of ways we need to change the character of the street, change the way in which the vehicle interacts with it, and start to prioritize what we all have been saying and hearing during this whole experience is it's about the pedestrian and the people that are within this space. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany to talk a little bit about some of the sustainability features along the block.
Thanks, Nathan. And thank you everybody for being here tonight. I just have 2 slides and I wanted to talk a little bit. I'm Tiffany Wilmot with Wilmot Incorporated, and we are on the team to make sure that sustainability is incorporated into all the designs. And as you know, sustainability is not just environmental, although that's a big part of it. It also has people So the social side of things and profit. So the money side. So the economics of it is important too, so that we can be sustainable and continue on doing what we want to do. So in getting feedback from everybody, these are some of the things that we heard, some of the top things, and they're not in order. But street trees, of course, you've heard a lot about that. These are additional street trees. We're looking at beautification, shade, cooling properties, beauty, and the ability for us to have some other types of some biodiversity. Something to consider with street trees now is as we are getting into, as we see climate change happening and heat happening, there are fewer and fewer trees that will be able to be used in Nashville. So for instance, nobody's planting, or people shouldn't be planting red maples anymore. So we have fewer trees, but we're looking at trees that are going to last and be something that we'll have for a long time. And we're going to go horizontally. So we'll talk about environmentally friendly building materials and local materials. So this is a way to save money. Local, of course, saves money. If you're buying something that's 20 miles away versus 1,000 miles away, you're going to save money on transportation and probably get your materials more quickly. We're also looking at using environmentally friendly materials. So instead of going to the rock quarry and buying virgin crushed stone, we can take concrete and crush it ourselves and get it for about half the price. You've heard a lot about sidewalk widening and improved sidewalk usage. So I'm not going to talk about that much, but that is part of the people, planet, profit. That's part of the people side, in giving pedestrians a bigger ability to use the street. We're being really careful about birds, just because that's a difficult subject. We want to provide habitat, but we also don't want, we have to keep our streets clean. So that's something we're considering. And then making sure that as we increase biodiversity, we also are being careful about use of herbicides and pesticides. Of course, limiting traffic flow is important, and that gives more of our emphasis on PEDs. And with green rooftops, that's kind of a catch-all phrase. That could be white roofs, it could be reflective roofs, or it could be green roofs. That can be a wildlife habitat. It also decreases stormwater costs. It insulates buildings. It soundproofs them. And it gives us another space. Sometimes people can use green roofs as another floor of their building. The next row is recycling and composting. So it's really important to us to make sure that we get recycling into what's happening with our waste, and composting. So if we can get the food, the putrescible, smelly part out of the trash and separate that, not only can we recycle it and compost it for reuse, we also reduce the odors downtown. There's less leachate on the ground, and it's a really heavy waste that we can keep out of the landfill. And as most of you know, the landfill is going to be closing. The one we use in Murfreesboro is going to be closing in the next couple of years. So anything we can get out of that waste stream will save us money long-term, as our waste rates are going to increase probably by quite a bit. I'm going to go next to shelters and canopies, where that's again providing shelter, rest areas, but also shade, as we have heat island effect. And that's the effect of, when you drive downtown, it's about 5 or 10 degrees hotter, depending on where you're coming from, with all the concrete holding the heat. So anything we can do to provide lighter colors and shading for people, and it'll keep the buildings cooler also. We're looking at solar for buildings and lighting. We have, thanks to Councilman O'Connell, we have a 100% renewable mandate, a renewable portfolio standard to get to 100% renewables. So that's something that's really important to us. And now that solar is the cheapest option, it's the cheapest fuel of any fuel, it's cost effective as well. The open public plaza provides gathering spaces, increased livability, and it's something that we heard from a lot of people. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the street planters and pervious pavement. So we have on Second especially a lot of underground utilities and basements where we may not be able to do rain gardens or pervious pavement. So on Second, we're looking at street planters to keep, we can put small trees in there, shrubs and flowers, anything like that. And then on First, we can probably do pervious pavement to help drain, to help drainage and maintain some of our water. Next slide, please. And then here are just a few pictures of some of the things we're talking about. In the top left, you see the street trees that we've been talking about, as well as specialty planters. There are lots of different options for planters, and that helps with protecting pedestrians from cars, as well as bringing beauty and some fresh air to downtown. Waste handling on the right, there are lots of different options for containers. We're looking at potentially on Second Avenue, having containers that will provide different recycling options. They'll be labeled, we'll make sure they're colored so that people know what to do. And then on First Avenue, that'll be back of house for the owners. And we're looking at consolidating some of the waste so that not everybody has to have their own container. The middle picture is heat reducing pavement and carbon sequestration with the heat island effect that we talked about earlier. We can reduce the heat by putting in lighter colored or reflective pavement. And there's new concrete now that has carbon sequestering properties, so we can sequester some carbon in the concrete that we use. On the right, on the bottom, those are some cool roofs in the back, light colored roofs, and you see the green roofs as well, which are really beautiful and nice for habitat. And then finally, light pollution is something we heard a lot about. On the far left, I don't know if you can see it, but on the far left, with light pollution control, you can see the stars. On the right, you can't see the stars. And basically you just put kind of a hat on your street lights and help direct that light that's being wasted and sent up into the sky. And you focus it down. So you double your number of lumens coming down. So it saves money and is better for light pollution. So I'm glad I got to talk to you about this, because next, when we go through the survey, there are some questions about this and that we'd love to get your feedback on. So we'll go back to Michelle. Thanks.
Thanks, Tiffany. We are getting ready to start our Menti survey, but I wanted to see, I know Lucy Kim, Executive Director of Metro Planning, is on. And I just wanted to see if you wanted to hop on for a moment, say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to all the members of the public who are here online and participating. We welcome you, and thanks so much to the presenters. It's really exciting to see some of the ideas that we are presenting here tonight. This neighborhood is very, very worthy of the very best ideas that we can come up with. The design process is iterative and it must be very carefully scrutinized. And so I urge all of you who are about to participate in the surveys to really use that as an opportunity to give us feedback so we can adjust and respond. And so we look forward to getting your comments. We want to know what we got right. We want to know where you think we have work to do. And that will help us shape next steps. So thank you so much, Michelle, and to the Civic Design Center as always for their excellent partnership.
Thank you, Lucy. And before we move on, I just wanted to recognize, I know that Councilman O'Connell is on the call today, and I think we've kind of chatted a little bit. I really appreciate you being here. Just want to see if there's any other council members here that maybe I'm missing. If so, feel free to unmute and introduce yourself. Okay, great. We're just going to move forward. Eric, Hoke, I believe you're up next.
Yeah, so now we're going to jump into this kind of participatory thing that is known as Mentimeter. So at this time, I'm going to ask you to either pull out your phone and scan this QR code, or open a new browser window and go to menti, MENTI.com. And then you'll be prompted with a code, and you can log in using 44597189, and that should get you into our survey here. And then this is just kind of a fun little icebreaker. Just what place do you interact with most on 2nd Avenue? And we can just see, once people start to get logged in, just go ahead and drop a little pin on the map somewhere, and yeah, let us know that you're here. And so we'll give you a few seconds to do that. I should also mention, at any point, if you get logged out or lose the link or something like that, you can always go back to menti.com, and then on the top of the screen here, you can see the code if you need to log back in. Great. Looks like we're pretty well spread out on the map here. Maybe looks like majority of folks are spending time on that first block we were talking about, commerce to broad. Yeah, fun. Okay, so that was our fun one, just to test it out. Don't worry, I think you can catch up if we get ahead of you. So just can you drop in your zip code for us? We just see who's here. Excellent. Very good, very good. All right, one more kind of generalized question here, but how do you interact with downtown? All right, lots of workers. Majority of you looks like, maybe. Excellent. So, yeah, as I mentioned, questions, and we can drop questions in the chat here, and then yeah, just if you get logged out, you can use that code at the top of the screen. It'll just always be there for you. So now I guess I'll turn it over to the Kimley-Horn team to go through these questions. So Eric, that might be you. Yeah.
Yeah, can do. Thanks, Eric. So we talked about sort of the balance of these different needs on 2nd Avenue. So really what we want you to do is help us prioritize. If you think about 5 different elements that we could provide more space to on 2nd Avenue, how would you put those in order from most important to least important? Is it wider sidewalks for pedestrian space, sidewalk dining and retailing areas, giving more space over to greening and landscaping? That's in addition to street trees. The street trees are a given. It's whether we add additional greening, as we showed in the concept image under the trees, or some additional planters or other greening. The loading, valet, drop-off areas, and or parking. So if you would put those 5 for us sort of in order from most necessary or most important, highest priority, to least necessary, least important, lowest priority.
Fun to see it fly in here in real time.
It is. Eric, what were we averaging about 28, 29 responses?
Yeah, I think we had maybe a little over 30 on the first one, so about 30 is probably good.
Great. Yeah, I think what we're seeing is not super surprising, particularly at the bottom of the scale. It's interesting when you go out and look at these 3 blocks of Second Avenue today, it feels like a lot of on-street parking. It's 49 total spaces. So basically what you could get in 1 level of a parking structure, or half of a large parking structure.
Great. That looks pretty good.
Great. So then let's think about the plaza. Now, I don't want you to get too fixated on the conceptual design of the plaza as we showed it today. Definitely noted that there were some comments in the chat about whether you really want to curve the street or not. But what about just the idea of creating this pedestrian plaza, this space within the block that creates a moment in time and gives more space over to other uses than the street? So as most of you are picking up, this is from the I love it to the left, to the meh in the middle, to the do not like it, do not support it on the far right end. Okay. All right, so then let's go a step further with that. If a plaza is incorporated into Second Avenue, give us a word or two that sort of describes what your vision is for what that plaza would be. What would be the character? What would be the meaning behind it? What should we use as sort of the inspiration for the design of that space? Perfect. So inclusive, engaging, inviting, active, clean is important. A couple nods to history. Yeah. Commemorate. There's a nod to the views, which was mentioned in the chat, of maintaining the view of the courthouse. Great. So then sort of, yeah, on Second Avenue specifically, as we start to move down, do you support the city redeveloping the Second Avenue North streetscape? Knowing we've got some details to work out, it's worth mentioning, what we're showing tonight is the concept plan. We're not even fully in the full schematics yet. So what we're going for tonight is really the design intent of the corridor. There's still things we've got to work out, some aprons, some loading areas, building access, but the overall design direction is sort of what we're looking to get your vibe on this evening. Great. So then Nathan, we'll sort of segue over to your area on first.
Absolutely. So we'll jump in a very similar question that you kind of just saw. So do you support the city in redeveloping and activating First Avenue North Streetscape? Again, we're at the conceptual phase right now of taking the feedback and input and starting to understand what that could look like. But generally, do you support that idea? Okay, so now we're gonna move over to the riverfront portion just a little bit. And what's a little different than the First Avenue and Second Avenue in terms of the concepts that we've seen. We've been able to utilize some of this time during the public engagement to start to get some feedback from you all about what this space could be. And so what we want to do tonight is talk about what some of those major themes are that we've seen from some of that feedback, and then ask for some additional input about what do you see as kind of your top 3. And so we're going to go through a few different categories that came through as the major themes from the input and engagement that we've seen to date. And then at the end, keep these in mind as we go through them. And then at the end, we're going to ask you 2 questions. We're going to ask you to pick your top 3 that you see that we're going to describe. And then we're going to ask you to pick 3 that you think would be your least preferred, or that would be at the bottom of your list if you had to put all these together. So the first that we heard, play for all ages. And this can mean a number of different things, but at the bottom, at the heart of it, the bottom line is that it's a space that all ages feel like it's playful and engaging. That could mean a climbing wall, that could mean these climbing structures that you see. It could be a slide garden, it could be swings, it could be a number of different things. We're not at the point of really defining what that is, but play for all ages was one of the themes. Go to the next one. Interactive water feature was another one of the major themes. Some type of space that allows you to engage and interact with the water in some way. This is showing kind of a bubbling feature on the left. The bottom left is kind of a terracing of different pools, and the one on the right is kind of more of a fountain. So just some type of interactive water feature, water element within Riverfront Park. Go to the next one. Food and drink options. Now, this is all within the park. We're going to have First Avenue right across the way and opportunities to engage and interact with it. But this is kind of small dining or food kiosks within the park in some form or fashion. And these are kind of just 3. Again, these images are just to give you an idea of kind of what this could be or kind of what this could really mean. Go to the next one. Connecting to the river. Now, we heard connection to the river as a really major theme. And this particular one is opportunities to connect to it visually, whether it's the way in which you're kind of positioned and fronting it on kind of some like beach or lawn element, or whether it's actually ways that you could paddleboard or kayak from or to the riverfront. It could be an opportunity that you could paddle to the riverfront, put your kayak in a bin and spend some time in the area, or you could depart from that location. But this is connecting to the river. Water access for transportation. So some sort of stop within Riverfront Park that would allow for a water taxi or transportation via the water. A connection to the Siegenthaler pedestrian bridge. Now, this is the idea that there would be a way to get from Siegenthaler pedestrian bridge down and into Riverfront Park in some way, directly connecting Riverfront Park to the pedestrian bridge. And again, these are just 3 pedestrian bridges just to get your thought and mind in the right space. And then an educational and information center. This could be a place where educational classes or programs are held. It could be classes or a center about the river or about the history. It could be an information center about the riverfront, just some type of facility that could fall within kind of those broad categories. Active programming. So this is the idea that there's regular active programming taking place, and it's taking place in some type of very regular pattern. And that could be anything from a yoga class to a volleyball game or league that's set up, to an event or movie night, to a number of different things that happen intentionally. And there's a group or outfit that's really tasked with actively programming the space. There's always something happening there. And the last one is just unprogrammed open space. Open space that could be used for different things. It doesn't have a specific program. It doesn't have a specific activation to it. It's just unprogrammed open space. And so what the ask is, based on all those that we just went through, what would create a riverfront space that would best connect with your needs in use of Riverfront Park? So if you would pick your top 3 from those that we just reviewed. And I know these are really small on screen. They'll be bigger on your device. And tell us what your top 3 would be that you would consider the most important. And there's one noted on your Menti that we didn't have a specific slide for, but that's dedicated funding for continued programming and operations, or maintenance and operations. And that's just the idea that um, operations and maintenance of the Riverfront Park facility itself for all the things that would be a part of it. All right, we'll give it one more minute, or not one more minute, but just a few more seconds rather. Okay, now based on that same list of themes that you saw, pick 3 that you would consider the least important. All right, great. You're gonna need 5 more seconds to pick yours from there. And then, is there anything that we've left off? Do you have other thoughts on programming operation that you would like to see in Riverfront Park? And this is an open-ended question that you can fill in, but is there anything that we haven't covered tonight? Do you have other thoughts? All right. A lot of great ideas and thoughts put out there. Thank you.
This is Lucy. I'm loving these ideas. There's some really great feedback here.
All right, and then this one, pretty self-explanatory, but pre-COVID, how frequently do you use the transit hub? I think that should say hub, but this would be the Riverfront Station area, where the bus and train hub is there. No explanation needed here. All right, now I'll turn it over to Tiffany. She will ask a few questions on sustainability.
And just real quick, we will have a couple of these questions we'll have to go through really quickly. And then if anybody wants to stay after, we will keep it open for Q&A. I saw Mark, your comment there. But yeah, we'll do our best to get through this quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, these are pretty quick. So as we widen the sidewalks, how would you like to use the space? And you can choose up to 3 options. All right, and then these are just other ideas if you have for improving the pedestrian space. You can put as much as you want in here. We would love to hear your ideas. So we'll just give you a minute here. Oh, some great ideas. Nice ideas. So great. Yeah, I especially like some of the ideas about a emergency call station. That's a good one. Okay, and then we're just looking at natural features like trees and benches and planters and making the street more welcoming. What would you like to see? What would be your favorite ideas here? And if you could just pick one, that would be great. Just give us your top choice. And I think this is our last one, right, Michelle? So other ideas for making our street more welcoming, anything you want here, and then we'll open it up to questions. I think Michelle has a wrap up. So thank you all so much.
While you guys are answering this question, I think we may have one more that just leaves it open for more, entering more questions or comments, which we'll leave that open while we even entertain a Q&A session here. It was a lot of information jam-packed in an hour and a half. I do want to go ahead and just let you all know that, you know, we've talked a lot about 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue, and the Riverfront area. You know, of course, the blast happened on 2nd Avenue, but as you know, you've heard multiple people talk tonight and in previous sessions. This is really something that it affects the area. You know, these buildings that were affected on 2nd Avenue, they also are affected on the 1st Avenue side. It's the same building, it's both sides of it. So it's very natural to start thinking about looking through, you know, through these buildings to the other side and the river. Right now, the focus is to prioritize 2nd Avenue streetscapes. And so those are, of course, the immediate damages. We do have sections of that street that absolutely needs to have repair no matter what happens. So this is a wonderful opportunity to really enhance the streetscape. Specifically, that middle block is the area, of course, that had the most impact. So that is it's a great opportunity to talk about different options for enhancing that. And this is an opportunity for feedback. So we're really happy to have your feedback. Again, it's early in the stages. You know, just a reminder, 1st Avenue is still closed right now, and it's closed because of the safety of pedestrians and safety of people. So we know we have work to do on 1st Avenue as well. We think that's something that can really help lend the opportunity to enhance activation of 1st Avenue. And we're really happy to see some of the building owners start to look at that as they're redesigning their spaces. So it's a wonderful way to, you know, not just build back, but build back in a much better way than really we ever could have had. You know, we've talked a lot about Riverfront here, specifically about programming and what to do and what pieces you all like. So, you know, there's been a Riverfront master plan since 2013. So it's something that has been on our city's mind for a long time. It's natural for us to go look at Riverfront along with these changes. And so what we're really wanting to do is get a really fresh understanding of what what the public wants, what the stakeholders want, what the residents of downtown want and in Riverfront, and be able to prioritize that. But also there's so many other developments happening up and down the river. You've got East Bank across the river. You've got River North, Oracle, Wharf Park. There's just so many things happening up and down the river that it's a really great opportunity to step back, take a look, and coordinate with our neighboring developments. And so this is what we want to do. We want to take your ideas and take your suggestions into today's terms for Riverfront, and that's what we're trying to get with your information. So with that, I would love to open the floor. If you have a question, put it in the chat. If you would like, we can, you can do the raise your hand feature and we can call on you. That's probably the best bet. Let's see here. Love the idea of using the trash recycling cans as public art. Yeah, that is a cool idea. Thank you. Thanks, Rochelle. Kim, thank you. You've been really active in the chat tonight, and we really appreciate that. You've had a lot of great information. And you're right, this is an excellent opportunity. It's, again, Nashville, my native year, we've had a lot of tough times with floods and fires and tornadoes, and here we have this blast, and it's an interesting, unique opportunity to take a really difficult situation and do the Nashville thing and make it a much better space. So we're excited, I guess, about that opportunity. Any questions here? I don't see anybody raising their hand. Oh my gosh. Well, we definitely, Mark, I saw your comment about, having a more opportunity for open dialogue.
Okay, wait a minute. I just turned my mute off. I get very confused by Zoom. It shows you how smart I am. Anyway, first place, this is the first time I've seen any of this. And I just think it's a great, almost superhuman effort to try to deal with, an issue which must bother everybody in Nashville on a regular basis. It was such a tragic event. And we'd rather be known for other things, right? Okay. I just have to, it's difficult for me to absorb all the information that I saw, right now. But it's, but I can tell everyone's working hard, and there's a lot of talent here on this team, and it looks like it'd be a very pleasant place. But I do have just a couple of observations. I can't say I have any opinions, all right, except for the ones I just said. What would be helpful for people like me who sort of walk into this thing to understand it better would be some overall diagrams to show how this works in connection to the courthouse, and on down to second, on down first, and how that connects back to the base of Broadway maybe, and then how it connects back up from Broadway to Fifth, I think would be a very interesting way of looking at it, to make it, in other words, so it isn't presented as a one piece thing. It's presented as part of the entire story, and also up Church Street as well. How does it connect to things? Like, for instance, like we talk about getting rid of on-street parking. And it seems like it's a very popular conception of what's going on here. But how do I'm parking my SUV and I've got 3 kids, where am I going to put it? How do I get to the place? I guess I could drop kids and dad off and then go park the SUV somewhere. But it'd be nice to know if there's some sort of plan about how to deal with that. I remember when I lived up on 7th and Church, I'd walk up to the top and I'd see all these minivans driving around TPAC trying to find a parking space and being confused by the different ways the streets went and stuff. And I guess a lot of people, but maybe even, drove home with their tickets unpunched. Maybe that's changed a little bit. Okay, I think that Joe, I think one of the comments that I read was to curve or not to curve. All right. Now, we need, I think we need, and y'all especially need, now that I live in Knoxville instead of Nashville, to think about the curving thing, because remember, it did not work on Church Street. On Church Street, it was a disaster. And it was more than one curve, you know, on Church. But since Church has been sort of straightened out, so to speak, and stuff, it's I think it's a very beautiful street. It's a different kind of street than Second Avenue. It's not about outdoor cafes and shopping. It's not a destination street. We'll put it that way. But the curving and the decorations of things and stuff there, you know, I like many of the ideas, the boutique trash cans and you know, and everything else. But you know, you got to, you know, I think we need to think about this as if, like, if you removed all the stuff that is movable, is it still a great place? Okay, I think you've got that one nailed down, actually. So I'm sorry to sort of like jump in after all this work has been done, because I've had it happen to me so many times as well. But I'm just very excited. I'm also just excited about being back looking at Nashville since I've left the design center. What is it now?
So glad that you're here, Mark. This has been really a wonderful thing to have you included and have your comments. And I think keeping you close to the next, you know, several rounds of the concepts and designs. I mean, clearly you're someone who started the Civic Design Center. I think everyone who's worked closely on this project thinks very highly of the Civic Design Center. We certainly have loved the partnership. So I think having your involvement would be huge in helping to see this through, so that it is a really great design. And I know we're getting a lot of comments in the chat, you know, about, do we have a curve? Do we not have a curve, and ways to activate in front of AT&T? I think we're really, really wanting to find ways to activate in front of AT&T. And one of the items that was on the street views, but it's hard to see, or adding kiosks in front of AT&T, and do something to sell goods and
it could be a food truck zone.
Yep, totally. I love that idea.
I mean,
and part of right now, the current scope of work is to include, you know, utility, water, those kind of hookups, so that you can have food trucks and you can have kiosks. And I think that's really important for the success. And in fact, some of the feedback we've heard from the stakeholders, especially on the other side, on the east side, you'd think that they wouldn't like, you know, first glance, you think we might not like having competition, but everyone really wants to have that because it brings people there and it activates that side. So great point.
They can always buy their own food truck and park it over there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, let's see. We want to see if we have any other questions, and we're kind of running over on time. So just
I know
to
we're
be
running
really...
over. I just want to say one more thing, please. Okay. Something has to happen up near the courthouse that pulls people from Broadway all the way through Second Avenue. And right now, I don't think, from what I saw, I don't think that has been defined yet. I'm sure it's been discussed. You know, it's like, remember the old theory of shopping malls? You have the anchor stores, and then all the other stores exist in between them. And the way they redid downtown Chattanooga was the same thing. You never put a big thing next to another big thing. You always pull it a few blocks away, so then you can activate the street in between. I'm sorry to make everyone go over, but I've had such a good evening.
Thank you so much. There was a lot of information jam-packed in an hour and a half. And so we, you know, again, this is our 9th public and stakeholder meeting. You know, the importance of reaching out and hearing from everybody. I mean, obviously everyone involved is on the same page and making sure that we're hearing voices, and as many as possible. So we'll continue this effort as we proceed, you know, down the path.
Hey, Michelle, this is Zach. Hey, everybody. I didn't speak earlier, but this is Zach Dufour. I'm a civil engineer with Kimley-Horn here in Nashville, working on the project as well. There was a question that I think Tom Turner asked, or a comment about the 12-foot lanes that were shown on some of the cross sections, and I just wanted to address that really quickly. Our initial intent actually was to put in 10-foot lanes to, again, make this more of a pedestrian space and take away from that vehicular feel. We're trying to balance, obviously, a lot of needs and a lot of other uses, and some things that have been impacting that are fire truck access, for aerial access with fire truck outriggers. And so the fire department has requested 24 feet of clear zone. NDOT has requested 11-foot lanes for WeGo bus routes. That's not currently a bus route, but just, again, for the flexibility in the future. So we're trying to balance those things. We've even talked about technically having 24 feet of pavement, but using different materials on the edges to maybe have 10-foot striped, marked travel lanes, and then a couple feet on each side that can accommodate that overflow for a fire truck or for a WeGo bus. But really narrowing down that travel lane for the feel of the vehicle and slowing traffic, make more traffic calming and making it more about the pedestrian. So again, to speak into that flexibility of the space, but I saw that comment. I didn't think it was addressed, and I just wanted to speak to that really quickly.
Thank you, Zach. Really appreciate that. You've seen in the chat, we've mentioned a couple times a biweekly newsletter. So really this team and the downtown partnership works together. Every other Friday, we issue a newsletter. We work really hard to keep it relevant. If there's nothing relevant to share, we're just going to pass and send it at a different time. So it's something that every time we send that, it's got really great key information, including when the next event could be, or how you can provide information, or all of those pieces of information. So it also has recordings to past links to recordings to past presentations that we've given. So if you'd like, I just stuck my email address in the chat, mscopel@ghp1.com. Please email me and we'll make sure and get you added to that list. It will go out this Friday. Usually it's on the Friday afternoon, every other Friday. So we'll send a link to this recording as well in that. So if you're not on that, please be added. Awesome. All right, guys, I know we've run over 10 minutes. Thank you for taking your time. This has been really wonderful. And I'm encouraged to see such great input and such great excitement. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up at this point, and we'll see you at the next one.
Well done, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, Michelle.
everybody.
And Nora too.
Everybody, team
Thanks,
effort.
Tom.
Thanks all.